Hey, what's up guys? Welcome back to the channel. Today we are back with another Budget Brew Breakdown where we build bangers without breaking the bank. And today we've got a really fun one, an oldie but a goodie with some new life breathed into him. This is Xenagos Penny Puncher. This is a pretty potent bracket 3 Xenagos build on a budget, sitting right around $50-ish or so right now. But yeah, this is a great choice if you're looking for a straightforward, aggressive bracket 3 budget deck, and one that I've definitely had a lot of fun building myself. Xenagos is actually a deck that I own in paper. It's a non-budget version, but it's actually, it's my oldest commander deck that I own. And so a little while back I got to thinking about what it would look like as a budget brew, and so yeah, let's take a look through it. By the way, thanks for dropping by the channel again. If you guys like budget brew breakdowns like this, please leave a like on the video and comment below if there's any particular commanders that you want to see a budget brew breakdown for in the future. I do have quite a bit of fun building these, and yeah, subscribe to the channel as well if you want to see those. Without further ado, let's get into this build. Alright, well, first and foremost, by the way, for anyone unfamiliar with Xenagos, Xenagos, God of Revels, 3 green and a red for a 6/5 indestructible, only a creature if you have 7 green or red devotion. That's green and red mana symbols, if you will. But that's not really the most important part. We'd honestly prefer if that he stayed an indestructible enchantment, because it makes him really hard to get rid of once we've actually cast him. The main meat and potatoes of his effect is at the beginning of combat on your turn, another target creature you control gains haste and +X/+X until end of turn, where X is that creature's power. So he will turn pretty much any respectable looking creature into an absolutely lethal threat in short order. So yeah, in that sense, he's a great candidate for a budget brew commander. He makes a lot of bulk box type creatures look pretty scary. So, but yeah, first and foremost in this type of deck, the first section I'll go through is we're running a really thick ramp package. 19 pieces of ramp in total, and that might sound like a lot, but you know, again, we're on a pretty straightforward game plan, and it's, you know, step 1 is ramp, and it's really important. You know, we're looking to get a turn 4 Xenagos at the latest, if not turn 3 Xenagos, which is actually relatively common with this amount of ramp. Notably, I think we have around 7-ish pieces of 1 mana ramp, like the traditional elves and like Land of War elves and Arbor Elf and that type of thing. There are a couple additional pieces of 1 mana ramp that can single-handedly ramp us twice, basically, into a turn 3 Xenagos. Something like Soul Ring, obviously, or Jiraga Tree Speaker, for example. But outside of that, I mean, we're really looking for 1 to 2 pieces of ramp in our opening hand, like I said, to get a turn 4 Xenagos at the latest, or ideally a turn 3 if we can combine, let's say, a pretty common line would be a Elvish Mystic on turn 1 or something of the sort into a turn 2 Cultivate. That's a pretty ideal line for this type of deck that'll set you up for your turn 3 Xenagos, and then turn 4 start slamming threats afterwards. So yeah, hence the heavy ramp package here, but yeah, it's been feeling good in all the gold fishing with the deck. You can obviously tweak the numbers there, but 90 pieces of ramp, and will help the deck get humming. And then yeah, let's go over some of the threats that we'll be slamming afterwards. Alright, first, as far as threats are concerned, I think one of the coolest parts about this budget build in particular, that kind of helps the deck operate as consistently and smoothly as it does, is for budget's sake and for versatility's sake, we actually have a decent suite of what I'd call versatile threats. These are cards that could actually, you know, pack quite a punch on their own with when you combine them with, you know, Xenagos's buff ability to double their power and give them haste. But they also provide some additional effects that you can use instead of, you know, getting stuck with a bunch of 5-6 mana plus creatures in your hand. So these are all things we can play out as threats with Xenagos's buff if we need to just jam something out there, or maybe there's you know, they have alternate abilities as well. Like Stormcloud Vanguard has a naturalize effect as an adventure sorcery. We're running a few different like cycling type creatures. Seismic Monstrosaur and Slave Ring Branch Snapper are both examples of that. 6 mana are respectable beaters that both have trample in their own right, so not upset about doubling that power, giving it haste and jamming in with that, but we can always cycle them out of our hand if needed. Similar story with Oliphant, 1 mana for mountain cycling. Aganosaur Rex, 5 mana 8/8 trample. By the way, power creep has definitely definitely helped our case for building a good potent budget Xenagos brew, because nowadays we have great 5 mana threats like Aganosaur Rex as a 8/8 trample in his own right, or he has a cool cycling ability that can provide some onboard buffs. Rampaging War Mammoth has a cycle him off to blow up some artifacts, or just jam him out there as a gigantic threat with Xenagos. Nice. And then, yeah, actually Bloom Vine Regent's kind of interesting one. Primarily interested in this one as one of our additional Cultivate type effects. Our 3 mana ramp spell that can help us get out Xenagos. But, you know, if we have to play him out as a 5 mana dragon, we're not upset about that. So those are some of the versatile threats that I think is actually part of the backbone of this budget brew and really helps it stay consistent and not get too bogged down by having 2 to 3, you know, big creatures in its hand, because a lot of the creatures have ways to, you know, cheaper effects and modes to use. So with that, let's go over some of the juicier threats. All right, speaking of juicy threats, yeah, here's our host of other threats we're running that kind of just pack a punch for their price. As you can see, I mean, this is actually sorted by price right now, so you'll be able to see, I mean, all of these creatures are, you know, pack an absolute punch, and all sub $1. Drakuseth Maw Flames. If you've never cast this card before, I'd highly encourage giving it a shot, especially in Xenagos. Comes out as a basically 14/14 flying haste, spews 4 damage, 3 damage, 3 damage respectively. That's a pretty good one. I'll give a shout out to Havoc Eater, actually. This is a card that I don't even have in my own paper build of Xenagos that I kind of want to give a shot. 7 mana, 3/3 flyer. That sounds below rate. Well, except for when he enters the battlefield, for each opponent, goad up to 1 target creature that opponent controls, which forces the creature to attack next combat, and it can't attack you. And then you put X 1/1 counters on Havoc Eater, where X is the total power of creatures goaded this way. So yeah, conservatively, you could easily see this coming down and getting maybe a 3 power creature per opponent, and getting himself up to a 12/12, which would hasten for 24 if we're doing our math correctly there. Let alone if you're goading some random big creature on any opponent's board and getting him up to, you know, a 15 plus power. This guy can, I think, threaten a one-shot pretty quickly, so you gotta respect him, and Havoc Eater packs a punch. Speaking of pack a punch, I'll shout out an old classic, one of our few extra combat effects we have in this deck, which definitely goes really hard with Xenagos if you've never played him before, because you get to, you know, double basically, since his effect says at the beginning of each combat, give the creature XX and haste. Scourge of the Throne will help get you an extra combat, and you can haste him in the turn you play him, and start really dishing out the damage when you start stacking up combats. So, but yeah, I mean, aside from that, there's just, you know, we have 17 proper threats, you know, with varying effects. You know, almost all of them, you know, you want some type of evasion on trample or flying or something so you don't get chump blocked. But yeah, lots of things that bring the heat here to supplement the versatile threats. I think in total the deck is running about 25 of its 100 cards are, you know, threats or creatures we can cast and soup up with Xenagos and get in there for beats. And yeah, once we've been able to, you know, ramp out and cast some threats, you know, at that point we're probably looking for, you know, a couple other things. So let's start going over some of that stuff. Okay, real quickly, yeah, so once we've gotten our threats developed with Xenagos, we're going to be painting big targets on our back. So I think the first thing we want first and foremost after we start jamming hasty Xenagos threats is some protection spells. And this budget build is just running 5 protection spells in total. All of these just very, very efficient 1 mana protection spells that can, you know, save your creature in a pinch. And sometimes all you need to do in Xenagos is, you know, save your creature once, or basically counterspell their removal spell, so to speak, and then it's lights out for them. So we're running 5 different of these 1 mana really efficient ones. Tameo Safekeeping is one that I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with, and maybe you've tried it. Target permanent you control gains indestructible and hexproof until end of turn. You gain 2 life. Defend the Rider is pretty much an identical effect. Both of these are just so versatile. They can help your threats dodge spot removal or board wipes or whatever have you. So these are probably the 2 best ones. But then also budget-friendly options. Royal Treatment is just another give a creature hexproof until end of turn, creates a Royal Roll token, which is kind of just extra on top. Snakeskin Veil, 1/1 counter, give hexproof for a turn. Ranger's Guile, give +1/+1 and gain hexproof for the turn. So you're seeing a theme here. You know, we don't need to get overly fancy with our protection or necessarily even try to equip our creatures with things that give it hexproof. We're just looking to, you know, kind of dig for some of our protection spells once we've found, you know, started developing our threats, and those are really going to help us settle our position if we're, you know, being arch enemy, and give us some insurance policies. But we're only running 5 of them, so we're going to need to figure out ways to dig to them, as I said, and let's go over some of our card draw. Okay guys, one of the coolest things about playing Xenagos is how much you can lean into what I'd call burst card draw. If you've ever played Green and Commander, you know, it's pretty clear that it has no shortage of effects that allow you to draw cards equal to the greatest power amongst creatures you control, and we've definitely leaned into that here, and we've, you know, spent a little bit of our a decent chunk of our $50 budget here, but I think it goes a long way. Most expensive of which currently, technically, is Greater Good, which is, in my opinion, just almost a must in Xenagos. You can almost argue that it's pulling double duty as a protection spell and card draw, because, you know, once you've got Greater Good out on board, you can just jam a hasty Xenagos threat with impunity, and if they want to try to remove it, I mean, you might be losing the creature, but at least you can sacrifice it off to, let's say, draw 14 cards and discard 3 cards, and you're pretty okay with that. That'll help dig you to more threats, protection spells, etc. Season of Gathering is a relatively newer one from Bloomburrow, and I think it just packs an absolute punch in this deck and just a lot of versatility. Burst card draw, you know, for the 3-paw effect. It can help you nuke artifacts or enchantments in a pinch, or just, you know, slam some extra counters and abilities on a creature at a key moment. Rishkar's Expertise, El Clasico at this point, one of the best cards we can be casting here in Xenagos. Lets us cast a 5 or less for free as well. But yeah, all these burst card draw effects are going to let us draw, you know, double-digit number of cards, and while we might be discarding some cards afterwards, we're fine with that. You know, I think if we're getting to the point where you're slamming threats and then drawing some cards, you know, double-digit number of cards, you know, we're probably threatening to potentially deal out lethal damage to the table within the next couple turns, I would say. So yeah, we've got some burst card draw there. We do have a few pieces of other card draw. They're kind of just more working man's card draw, if you will. I don't know, maybe I'm the only one who loves Harmonize. I feel like people sleep on this card, but for me, in almost any deck, 4 mana, draw 3 feels like such a good rate, and at a good, like, mid-range level of fill up your hand. Escape to the Wilds are definitely one of the best card draw spells in this deck, besides the burst. You know, exile the top 5. You get until the end of your next turn to play them all, and you play an additional land this turn. Highly recommend giving this card a shot in general if you're running a Gruul deck, and it's only 48 cents right now. Super budget efficient. Inspired Tinkering, kind of similar effect. You get 3 cards, access to 3 cards until the end of your next turn, and then you create 3 treasure tokens to help spam them out. But yeah, so there is our card draw package. Definitely important to keep the deck humming, and besides that, we do have, you know, although we're a pretty proactive deck, every deck needs some amount of removal, and this deck actually provides a sneaky amount of removal, so let's actually go over some of that. Alright, so we got a decent number of pieces of removal, we'll call it here, to help clear the way, whether it's creatures, artifacts, enchantments, etc. And like I said, you know, even though we're proactive, we definitely have a healthy amount of it. But the nice thing is a decent amount of it is actually stapled to our creatures, and you'll see some on some of our versatile threats. You know, we talked about Stormkeld Vanguard earlier. Can, you know, an evasive threat in his own right, or a naturalized effect on him. We've got a few different things that kind of spew damage out to creatures. I think Summon Kujata, pronunciation, question mark. This is actually one I had not seen at all because I didn't play much of the Final Fantasy set, honestly. But what an absolute house in this budget build, especially. 24 cents right now, and it's one of the final saga creatures from Final Fantasy. 6 mana, 7/5 trample haste, immediately deals 3 damage to up to 2 target creatures and help clear the way. Speaking of clearing the way, the next turn he gets to make 3 creatures unable to block. And then yeah, his last ability is what? So discard a card, draw 2, and then beam each opponent for the mana value of the discarded card. And yeah, the other thing I like about this is although Xenagos himself, you know, gives XX and haste to, you know, basically one creature per turn. If we get to the late game where we ramped out a bunch and we have, let's say, 10 to 12 plus mana, you know, stuff like Summon Kujata that has haste in its own right opens up some lines of play where we can play out a different threat that needs the haste and buff from Xenagos, and also potentially play this card to really leverage our mana and cards in hand and maybe really push us over the edge. So I think this is a really sweet one. Inferno Titan helps us spew off damage to kill creatures. Incinerator of the Guilty is kind of like Veilfire Dragon at home. It's a 6/6 flample for 6 mana. When it deals damage to a player, collect evidence X, which is exile mana value X cards from your graveyard, and then it deals X damage to each creature and planeswalker the defending player controls. So anyways, yeah, Drakuseth, similar story, but then you'll also see just some classics. Blasphemous Act is just almost a must in Xenagos. I think the ability to go from maybe just Xenagos and an empty board to pay 1 mana for Blasphemous Act and then immediately cast a hasty creature to take control of the board again is invaluable. So Blasphemous Act is great. Ram Through really synergizes with our deck with all the number of tramply creatures. Get anything out of our way basically, and trample that extra damage over to the player. Super potent. Decimate is an absolutely nasty one. If you guys have never cast this, it definitely yields a reaction when you cast this card, and it's really easy to cast in Xenagos specifically because if for anyone unaware, you actually have to have all 4 targets available in Decimate to be able to cast it. That's an artifact, a creature, an enchantment, and a land. Not usually a huge issue. I would say enchantments are actually the one thing that sometimes don't show up on a board or might not be available. Except for in Xenagos, it is always available. I mean, as long as you have Xenagos out himself, he just sits there as an indestructible enchantment. So it's totally respectable sometimes if you need to cast Decimate to get a bad creature and artifact out of the way and nuke off a land. You can just target Xenagos as the enchantment if you really need to. But yeah, Decimate, always getting the job done. Yeah, anyway, so a healthy amount of removal. You know, we're not the most, we're trying to be the deck that's asking more of the questions maybe than providing the answers, but the nice thing is that we can kind of wrap some of that up into one. And the last thing I'll go over here is, you know, we talked about extra combats a little bit earlier. I think in this build, we technically only have access to 2 extra combat effects right now. One is Scourge of the Throne, very on budget, but another one that's very on budget and super potent in this build, Last Night Together from the Doctor Who set. Choose 2 target creatures, untap them, put 2 1/1 counters in each of them. They gain Vigilance, Indestructible, and Haste until end of turn. After this phase, there's additional combat phase, and only the chosen creatures can attack during that combat phase. Not an issue at all for this deck where we're primarily swinging in with 1 to 2 big creatures and going really tall. So this puts in a lot of work in the deck. You know, I don't think you need to necessarily jam Xenagos full of extra combat spells. You know, we have 2 right now. You could definitely make an argument for 1 to 2 more, depending on what you prefer and all that. And certainly there's some of them that are out of our budget range. But we've got access to a couple. Last Night Together will really, it might be, you know, it might be curtains and a good night for the pod if you're able to cast this card. So, okay, real quick before we move on, one extra combat effect that I will shout out that I kind of wanted to give a try in the deck at some point, just didn't make it quite into the first draft, is Fury of the Horde. If you guys haven't seen this one, it's 7 mana. It's a 7 mana extra combat spell basically, but you can free cast it if you exile 2 other red cards from your hand. You can just do that instead of paying the mana cost, which I think could actually be really potent in this type of deck, considering how much burst card draw we have. Because I could definitely see a world in which we start doing our thing, we cast a burst card draw spell, and all of a sudden, we drew into a Fury of the Horde and another red card or 2, and bam, take an extra combat. So not in this current build, but definitely interested in giving it a shot. I think it'd be potent, especially with all of our burst card draw. It's, you know, it's not crazy expensive, but for this budget build, I was really trying to keep it right around $50. So for the time being, you know, didn't find room for it, but yeah, definitely interested in trying it out, maybe in the next edit of it. All right, so now that we've gone over the whole deck, why don't we goldfish a few hands together and see how it plays out and see some of the play patterns. All right, well, let's start goldfishing some hands together and see how it plays out. One of the other nice things I will say about this deck is that the mulligan decisions are pretty straightforward, honestly. I've goldfished it quite a bit, and I think I think your keep criteria is you're just looking for a hand with at least one piece of ramp to represent a turn 4 Xenagos at the latest. So in this case, this hand has got more than that. We actually have a little bit too much ramp actually, so we'll probably need to ideally draw into some type of threat. But it's still a great hand. It'd definitely be a keep. This is a, we've got a piece of 1 mana ramp in the Fyndhorn Elves here, and then actually 2 different cultivate effects, I will call them. In this case, we have Kodama's Reach and Nissa's Pilgrimage that can do the same. But I definitely keep this. This is a turn 3 Xenagos, and the deck is running 25 threats. I think I mentioned that earlier, so our chance of drawing something is really good. And besides that, we've got protection and burst card draw on stack. So all we need to do is get some threats really. So let's see how it plays out. Well, there's one threat, 7 mana. So we'll see if we can make our way there. But this would be turn 1 Fyndhorn Elves for sure. This is easy. Turn 2 Mountain and Kodama's Reach in this instance. And I think we'd probably grab. I think we'd actually go mountain here with Drakuseth in our hand, and we got green sources on stack. So I think this would be a, get to mountain situation. And yeah, so in this instance, this would be a nice little turn 3 Xenagos. Not upset about that at all. It's a pretty fast Xenagos, but I feel like based on the goldfishing I've done, it maybe happens like 30 to 40% of the time. Maybe 1/3 of the time is fair. Hard to say exactly without the data, but it's pretty common. We're running a lot of ramp, as you can see. And in this instance, okay, turn 4. Unfortunately, it doesn't look like we would get to play out a proper threat here since we only have a 7 mana threat. But the nice thing is, we could take this turn to ramp a little more and cast something like Nissa's Pilgrimage. And we'll play out one more turn. We'll cast both Nissa's Pilgrimage and Rampant Growth. So let's go into our deck, and actually, funny enough, we'd actually get the Spell Mastery clause in Nissa's Pilgrimage that almost never comes up. But we'll resolve our Rampant Growth here, and we'll get a forest. Why not? Actually, we'd get a mountain here since Nissa's Pilgrimage will get us three forests. So yeah, there's our Rampant Growth, and we'll get 3 forests actually from Nissa's Pilgrimage. 1 goes to the field, 2 go to our hand. So a total setup turn for us here. But the next turn, we are looking pretty darn solid for the rest of the game. We're going land, and we're sitting on 9 mana here, which is obviously enough to go 7 Drakuseth with protection up in Royal Treatment. So yeah, this would be a really solid hand. It kind of takes 1 turn off as a setup turn, but this is still a turn 5 hasted, protected Drakuseth Maw of Flames. I don't mind that at all. But let's goldfish another one. All right, so this is an example of a hand that I'd keep that it doesn't represent turn 3 Xenagos right off the bat. We just have the 1 piece of ramp and Fyndhorn Elves here. But I'd still keep it. It's got Fyndhorn Elves, up to 4 lands, I guess. We have Forest Mountain, Stomp as a modal dual face land if needed. Same thing with Disciple Fraley. So I would definitely keep this. And turn 4 Xenagos, obviously we'd like to cast him on turn 3, but perfectly acceptable to keep. And let's see how it plays out. This would be, again, turn 1 Fyndhorn Elves. We're running so much ramp, by the way, that any hand that has, a piece of turn 1 ramp especially, you get a couple opportunities to draw another piece of ramp and speed up your Xenagos a bit, but didn't quite happen for us here. So in this instance, I think maybe I would just consider playing this here Stomp as a tapped land and just get it out of our hand in that way. Turn 3 here. Again, not doing too much. This might be a good opportunity to just spend one of our versatile threats in Stormceld Vanguard to maybe interact with the board a bit. Destroy target artifact or enchantment. Send him on an adventure, and then from there on out, now we're looking fine. It's casting Xenagos on turn 4, which is not that bad at all. We're fine with that. Bracket 3 pods especially, and then from there on out, you can see how it plays out in that way. We have a couple options of 6 mana threats here. I think maybe I'd play Incinerator the Guilty in this instance and turn him into a 12/12 hasted Flample Dragon. And yeah, once you got Xenagos online, usually the plan is you just Just keep jamming threats at them until they're dead. Try to find your protection spells. Use the burst card draw to get down there and, you know, leverage your big creatures in that way. So, but yeah, so that about wraps it up for this week's Budget Brew Breakdown as Xenagos Penny Puncher. Hope you guys have liked this one. I highly recommend building it. This will be a very new player friendly deck. If you have a friend that you're trying to get into Magic or likes, you know, big green red stompy beats, Xenagos does it better than almost anyone. But yeah, and again, this deck is just a lot of fun, very straightforward. You get to draw lots of cards after beating face with giant hasted threats, and who doesn't love that? So yeah, can't recommend this one enough. Thanks again for you know, taking a look through the Budget Brew with me, and I'll hope to see you on the channel again soon. Peace.